So my next question comes in from James in Connecticut, and it's about the new $20 bill with Harriet Tubman on it, because we got to get that evil white guy Andy Jackson off of there. By the way, for all the liberals that fought hard for this, all the Democrats that wanted women's rights and they wanted to put Harriet Tubman on the 20, isn't it great that Andrew Jackson is the founder of the Democratic Party, which has traditionally been the party of racism and opposing women's rights? I'm a political atheist, so I don't really care, but I'm just kind of pointing that out. Andrew Jackson at least did kill the central bank. That was probably the best thing Andrew Jackson did for this company and paid down the debt. But it is the founder of the Democratic Party and the historically racist Democratic Party. And Harriet Tubman was a gun-toting Republican. It's just interesting to point out. This question really has nothing to do with that. I just think that's interesting, isn't it? Isn't that great? Anyway, hey Jack, I have a question about the topic of putting Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. That's where I thought this was going. It didn't. I'm not too savvy when it comes to economics, but when I heard this, my instinct was it sounds like a great marketing strategy to justify printing more money. Am I reaching here? I've heard without verification the Federal Reserve actively destroys old bills. My gut tells me it does not exceed the amount of new money being brought into circulation. Any thoughts or concerns we should be looking at here? Okay, the Federal Reserve prints money electronically. The Federal Reserve does not print paper money. Did you know that? Now they print the representation of physical money, but they don't actually print the actual physical dollars. That's done by the United States Mint and Treasury Department, right? Actually, just the Department of Treasury. The Mint makes coinage. So, no, the Federal Reserve doesn't really kind of control how many paper bills are floating around out there. Next up, only about 3% of the total M3, that's all the money that is in paper bills. 97% of the money is electronic. It's ones and zeros in a computer. When they say they're printing money with quantitative easing and stuff like that, it's not like the printing press is actually going spitting out bills. What they actually mean is somebody types down and says, make deposit into Bank of America, $14 billion or whatever it is. And then the Federal Reserve takes possession of their bonds and new money is created out of thin air. That's how they make new money. The same way the banks make money when they loan you money to buy a house. What? The banks print money? Yeah. Yeah, when you go to, let's say you go to leave names out of this, you go to Joe Blow's bank. Right? You go to Joe Blow's bank, you go, Joe Blow, bank officer, I would like to borrow money, please, to buy a house. And they go, okay, do you have credit? So they run all your stuff and they go, yeah, you qualify, you can buy up to $250,000 house. What you think they do is you think that they give you money that they already had, and then they hold a reserve against that money. That's not what they do. What they actually do when they loan you $250,000 is create $250,000 based on your promise to pay it back. That's what they really do. They make a journal entry with a computer that says, deposit into the hands of Thomas Smith, so that's your name, $250,000. And that used to then buy the house. And you tender some form of down payment and what have you. And then your promise to repay the debt plus interest results in the creation of $250,000 of new money. This is called fractional reserve banking. It's a way they expand and contract the monetary supply in America today. Did you know that? Not just the Federal Reserve prints money. This is a good gig. The banks are in on it too. So the Federal Reserve, in its attempt to spur inflation, because deflation is terrible in a debt-based society, and all our money's debt, therefore we're in a debt-based society, and deflation is like the worst thing economically that can happen. I'm not saying that a deflationary economy can't be good. I'm saying it can't be good based on the type of economy we have. We need a steady 2 to 4% inflation for the plan to work. The plan is to screw you. Let's make no mistake about that. The plan is to screw you and steal value from your money, but to keep the whole economic machine churning, they need that. That's why they try to spur inflation. So when they dump a whole bunch of new money in the economy, what they're hoping is that money has then what's called monetary velocity. So they push money into the top, and what they're looking for is the banks to start going, okay, we can only sit with so much cash. We got to find some place to loan it out. When they loan it out, they're not loaning the money they were given. They're loaning a percentage of what they were given. So if you give a bank $1 billion. It's not that it can now loan $900 million. When you work out all the math, the bank can turn around with that $1 billion and loan out $9 billion, holding the billion as a 10% reserve by the creation of new money. So Harriet Tubman going on the bill, or when Andrew Jackson went from little Andy Jackson to big Andy Jackson, when the money got all the colors on it that looks so much like Monopoly money, it's almost scary. And all these different changes that are made to the paper bills, some of those are legitimate things to help prevent counterfeiting. But there has always been a policy of every so often changing the way the money looks. Why would they do that? Well, because the more times they do that, the more people have an expectation of what cash is supposed to look like. So when Harriet makes her debut, and I think it's 2020, and you come into a store 5 years later and you pay with good old Andy Jackson, no one's going to look at it sideways. But what if it's an old Andy Jackson without the little strip in it, really, really old money, the money they destroy? Then what is this? Recently, there was a story of a child that went to a school in Houston and spent a $2 bill that came from a bank, by the way, that was from like the 1950s, and was accused of passing a counterfeit bill and threatened with a felony until the officers actually tracked it back to where it came from, and the bank said, yeah, it's a real bill. It started out because the stupid people that run your public school systems and law enforcement officers apparently in Houston are too dumb to even know that there is a such thing as a $2 bill. You know, it has Thomas Jefferson on it and Scenes of Liberty on the rear. I guess that's why they're not familiar. Anyway, so they tracked this down and figured out it was real. Well, what really kind of set it in a spiral was the people in the cafeteria have these little counterfeit pens that you've seen when you know, usually they don't do it on 1s and 2s and 5s, but bigger bills like 50s and 100s, they'll take this little counterfeit pen out and they mark it. It's supposed to look a certain way, and if it doesn't, it's a fake bill. So they take this out, and this bill's so old, it doesn't work for this bill. They put the mark on it, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Oh my God, it's a counterfeit bill. We're going to put this 13-year-old in prison for a felony for passing a $2 bill, right? You don't counterfeit. You don't, God, I'll put a link in the notes. You don't counterfeit $2 bills. What kind of person can afford to counterfeit $2 bills other than the government, all right? So that starts to lead you why they do this. It's not just to prevent counterfeiting. It's because people become uncomfortable with older and older bills. While they're still technically legal tender, they become uncomfortable with them. So, what if you're someone that has said, you know what, I don't trust the banks, I don't trust the government, and I'm going to take some of my money off grid, and I'm going to do it in the form of cash. And I'm going to get a safe or a lockbox or something. I'm going to band it up in 20s. So I'm going to put $20, $30, $40, $50,000 in cash away. The government doesn't like that. They'd like that money to surface like a submarine. And then they're going to ask you, where'd all this cash come from? You know, unless it's going into an immediate purchase or being parceled out bit by bit. If you just walk into the bank one day with $50,000 in cash, and say I have old bills I'd like to exchange for new bills, we're going to have one of those suspicious activity reports go down. I promise you. Even though there's no actual transaction. By the way, they're not going to have the cash for you. What if you go to deposit that much cash just out of the blue? Decide you want to bring it into the bank. Why would you? Well, what if it's starting to kind of be money that ages? You have money put away. Some people have hundreds of thousands of dollars put away like this. They only spend cash. You know, how often do you see a $20 bill with a date on it of 1975? Not very often. One or two, fine. But what happens when, you know, someone decides I want to pay cash for a car, and they go down to a car dealership and make a deal for $10,000 cash and actually bring cash, and they're all 1982 bills, and that looks a little funny. Well, the more you change the money, the more you surface cash, the more you compel people who are stockpiling cash to come exchange it, to bring it back on grid. So there's definitely political motivation in replacing Andy Jackson, because we could have made another change without doing that. But that's why they change the physical money so often, to surface money, to make it show up, to make people uncomfortable with taking large amounts of cash that doesn't look the way the cash is supposed to look today. Now you know. With that, let's take another one.